And morning, Richard. How are you
Thanks.
doing?
Thanks for that boost just before we started. Much appreciated.
Just standing desk broken again.
No, it went shut up. Massive. What did you say? It's a massive piece of morning glory this morning. My desk had a piece of morning glory, so it shut up really quick.
Shut up really quick. Shocking. That's my dinner last night, if anyone's wondering what that comment's for. A vegetable dish called Morning Glory, which was delicious.
Was it now?
Yeah, it was a bit like runner beans in sauce, to be honest, but I don't actually know what whether that's an actual plant that they cooked or whether that's just the name of the dish.
Oh yeah, how can they? That's a very interesting way of naming it, then, isn't it?
Yeah, it must be called that. Otherwise, that'd be silly.
Is
But
it like
anyway,
a breakfast dish? Because I know that
no.
people that eat crappy cereals is the Western world.
I love cereal, and
I proved
it
my
was
point.
yeah. Well, it was, what would you say? Visually, it looked like long kind of runner beans or something. They're the thin ones. Green bean in a sauce with chili and garlic and something else. So it must be a dish
Yeah.
of some sort. But yeah, anyway, enough
So,
about my dinner out last night. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
There's that thing in the sky today. I didn't know what it was this morning.
I know, it was a shock, wasn't it?
I thought it was a Death Star. It's actually the sun.
Although incredibly cold still. But
Yeah, but I can deal with cold if it's sunny.
yeah, it's not quite so bad, is it? The last few dog walks have been Baltic. But not my job.
Baltic.
Not my job today.
Delegation is the art of
Yes.
great management.
Well, she's away from tomorrow again for 6 or 7 days, so goes back on to me for the rest of the week. So she's doing a good week today.
Pie and chips for two. Rest
Yeah.
of the week then, is it?
Yeah, I actually turned down pie and chips the other day. It was what was it? It was the Tesco Valentine's range, and they had a beef shin and smoked bacon pie, and they had obviously two of them because you meant to share apparently.
Well, no, it's a bit of a joke, isn't it?
But
Two actually means a meal for two.
yeah, I looked at it, and the fat content was 51% of your daily allowance per pie. And I was like, well, you can't eat both pies then, can you? Because that's 102%.
You could, you just can't eat anything else.
You can't eat any other fat during that day. But even for me, that's far too high. So I'll stick.
There's a lot of context on that, though, isn't there? And a lot of debate. No two calories are the same. There's different versions of the same thing. So we won't go down that rabbit hole because
No, God, no. Just take a bit of test off.
I would definitely be still going tomorrow anyway.
Anyway, Richard, what are we going to chat about this week?
What did I say? It was data ethics, but obviously wrapped around that was the use of data by certain establishments to paint a picture that maybe isn't what's being shown in reality. More around, I guess I put a post out the other day, and I was saying about how the NI changes and things, and everyone was saying, oh, it's impacting, and this article was in the press today saying it's going to bite and people are going to struggle and they're stopping hiring, pausing project, all this stuff. But and you sort of got me thinking about how you see all these statistics posted out by certain public related bodies, and you sort of going, where do they? I mean, how can you quantify that? How far down do you have to dig before you can be comfortable that's the truth? And then there was a while ago I saw that there was a project that was to do with, I think it was employee survey for the ONS, and they were saying that it was like years over budget, as in time budget, and financially it was just like tenfold what it was, and it was to replace something that was not fit for purpose. I may have misquoted, but feel free to go and look at it yourself. But it's an actual article that was out there, and I was going, well, how can on one hand somebody say that this is the situation that's going on, this is the information, and you should base your view, your judgment, your decisions on this information I'm providing you, and on the other hand say, well, a lot of the other crap we've got isn't fit for purpose, so it's a pile of shit. So you're going, well, how can you still present something if you know it's a load of crap? And then somebody, I guess that's where the ethical question comes in. Not that I'm saying the ONS is producing something that is a pile of crap. I'm just saying, in theory, how can you present something knowing that it's not, maybe would not necessarily stand up to too much critique?
But people do, don't they? Because I mean, I know your examples, but that's just flashbacked me to one, and I won't mention what it was because I'll end up in court. But I know full well where I worked a decade ago, there were business cases that were presented to achieve something they wanted to achieve, where the numbers in that business case had been massively inflated to show values or rents or potential income that could be earned to get the business case approved to then do what they wanted to do, kind of knowing that the budgets would not meet or the criteria wouldn't be met or other things wouldn't happen. Almost, I wouldn't say building in contingency from day one for what they knew wasn't right, but there were lots of times that, and it wasn't always hidden. I think on that particular one, it was fairly common knowledge that the numbers had been massively inflated. It was around property value and what something would be worth, and so the people presenting that must have known at the time they were presenting something that was kind of, let's just call it false, because actually the organisation as a whole had kind of already made the decision that what they wanted to do was the other thing, and therefore you needed to justify it. And if you could justify it through a few tweaks and a few number changes and adding a decimal point and flipping a 7 and a 5 around the other way from 57 to 75, it made it work.
Well, that's, yeah, and I think it's like if you make a decision as a business and then you measure that decision, if you only ever want to see it if it's the right, if it validates what you've done, and that's completely the wrong thing. That is questionable ethics, questionable morals, integrity all goes out the window, and you're going, well, that's just crap. I mean, how could why? I mean, yeah, that's kind of my whole question really. Is like, well, but it does come into it for me. And I've said on here examples when you're going, why? I mean, I don't ask a question. There's always that bad is don't ask a question if you don't want to hear the answer, right? And it's like you have to be prepared to accept what answer comes back. And there was this like which has popped into my head. If the old Dragon's Den pitch, right, when they say they want £100,000 for 5% equity in my business that's currently turning over £10,000 has zero,
Yes,
and you're going,
just valued you can hit 2 million.
yeah, and you're going, and like quite rightly, I haven't watched it for a while, but quite rightly, they would generally be torn apart by saying, well, how can they're overinflating the valuation of their company based upon what they think they're going to get, where they want to go, rather than this is the actual
There they are.
turnover, this is the revenue. It's like I've got 10 people potentially going to come and do some work, do some bits, so I'm going to inflate my costs, and my company is now worth 15 million quid. And
Yeah.
you're like,
But even on that one, isn't it? It's a bit like, I know I need 100 grand, but I also know I don't want to give away a large chunk of my company.
so
But
what
actually,
does that 100 grand relate to by way of
yeah,
a number?
as a number, I quite like the number 5%, so I'll go in with 5%. But actually, 100 grand is probably 100% of your company based on the current valuation of it.
Or
But
150% if you but that's obviously getting into a whole other conversation of
yeah, absolutely. It's right. I know you touched on even like the NI stuff as well, and how that's been justified and the numbers around that, and how you kind of. I get really confused with all of this because the biggest employer in the country is the government.
NHS.
NHS, civil service, public service, local government, thousands of employees. So if all of their NI goes up and they're all funded
Pay
by the
more to
government,
get some money back.
so how does the kind of the cycle work? You're literally giving everyone more money to pay more people to get more money back into your own
And
coffers.
I get there's probably going to be a net gain there of some description, right? So if you pay an extra £7, you might get £10 back. But it seems to me that to me defies all logic, personally. I mean, I guess they can't just say, oh, it excludes public sector, because then you're like, well, how the fuck does that even fare? But you're like, how does that? It doesn't even stack up. I mean, every time, because that post did. I mean, I have had quite a people saying, oh, it's the way it is, and everyone's got to pay, and it's like, and I get that. At what point do, because I know, because I was saying, how are they? Who's holding people accountable for this? How do they? Oh, I think it'd be done in the 4 years in the budget, and I'm like, yeah, but every 4 years, people vote with whatever bullshit comes out of these people's mouths at the time, and you're going, who every day is standing there in front of these going from the real world example and going, that's not good enough. You can't do that's just. I mean, I don't know. We're getting a bit political now, aren't we? Which is what I said at the beginning. I didn't want to avoid because I don't have any allegiance. They're all just like whatever, assuming they're not followers and listeners.
I don't know if Boris listens anymore. He did the
He
first
did.
few, but then he dropped off when we said you had to show that
Maybe
you
he
pay
didn't
to
like
actually prove stuff.
maybe he didn't actually like what he was hearing.
Yeah,
But it's true. I mean, how it's the same, isn't it? They pluck numbers out. And most of this stuff is theoretical, think tanks, people producing old fantasy. Well, fantasy is a bit, but you know, they're producing projections, they're producing what if scenarios. If everything goes hunky dory to plan, we're going to hit this much growth. And then within 2 weeks, the whole thing falls apart because something's happened and the people have gone, the markets have gone, screw it, the business have gone, the Bank of England has gone, woo, put the right, and everything's just gone. Well, that's just out the water. So the only person you're only then accountable for that, either in 6 months when you do another budget, or within 4 years when the end of the parliamentary cycle. That's not real, is it? It's not real. You can't just throw a number out there and go, oh, fuck it, I don't care if it's right.
yeah.
It's not
But then,
mine.
but throw a number out and go, we're aiming for 3%, and then when it's 0.9, go, oh yeah, but that's still fine. Next month, and it's just like that constant. And I'm with you.
That's okay because we did not foresee this was going to happen.
Yeah,
Like what?
and it's like, well, don't. It's almost like don't even bother. Then just let it happen. We'll figure it out after the event. But I mean, you see ethics and everything. I mean, politicians, I don't think you can bring into ethics anyway because very few of them seem to have any. But you do. I mean, even in selling, don't you? I see loads of posts now, even about ethical selling and how you do your sales processes and whether or not is the fact that we're having to call it out as ethical selling almost like
Admittance that it's actually a
admitting,
load of crap in the
yeah,
first place.
and therefore do we need to start calling out that we're using ethical data?
I think it's a very genuine question, and I think I obviously, as I've said on here before, if I'm asked to produce something, that number is checked, validated, and if it's right, it's right, and if it's not, you don't like it, then that's not for me to change it. If you want to change it, then knock yourself out. But that's not my generally, unless I am in that capacity, then I would say, well, that's your choice, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I think it's just two different worlds, isn't it? About how you can say something. Even well, this is going to go down another rabbit hole now. People like supermarket and producers and manufacturers, right, where they say 67% of people found a benefit from this out of the 77 people that were questioned. 77 people didn't happen to be sponsors or paid for their opinion, did they, by any chance? And you're going, how can you represent that on there? How can you show that as a marketing employee when the number you look at it and go, well, that's obviously bollocks, isn't it?
And I'm going to add to that, it's always a completely random number as well, isn't it? It's never a round number.
So for me, they've gone, I get rid of that fucking those 20. I don't want those answers in there. Thank
Get
you.
rid of those ones.
Happy with that now.
But if we say it's 77% of 57, no one can work that out during the advert as to how many people that actually
It
is.
looks really good.
It looks good, but actually, when you do the maths back and whatever that is, probably 30-ish out of the 50 odd, you're kind of then looking at it going, oh, well, that's actually not many.
What they've done is they've took all of that and gone, well, we'll get rid of that. We've changed the criteria actually now. We've got all the answers in. What we've done is we've now changed the question so we can reject 3/4 of people that thought this product was fucking terrible. What's wrong with my mouth today? Why have I got potty mouth?
You got
And
potty,
then
I know.
they've gone, well, just take this. and then we'll run with that, and then we'll just make it slightly negative, take a bit off it, just to make it a bit
But
more
you
believable.
also get ones as well, don't you? Where, and I've seen this a lot, where I refuse to fill them in, where almost like the answers you're allowed to give in the questionnaire are kind of like three mildly positive answers or something. It's like, were you extremely happy, happy, or just mildly happy? And it's like, none. I was extremely angry, but there's no box for that. So
Just your own, just
the
draw
only,
your own on.
yeah. So 99% of our customers were mildly happy or above with our service, you know, because that's the only option you gave them.
Any other input to have? Yes, it was awful.
Yeah, but I genuinely I don't think. I mean, I don't. I'm not going to go down too many political rabbit holes either. But
I
I think
think
that
I think we've shot that one. I think we've gone.
shot that one. Yeah, but yeah, I agree though on ethics, and especially with data, where I think it's as we said, isn't it? It's where you're trying to use data to support your opinion on something rather than taking almost the data at face value and going, actually, this is what our data is telling us, and therefore this is what we should be doing. And I think it's used far too often to kind of justify what you want, and therefore maybe manipulated, twisted, or certain elements of it removed because they don't fit the criteria. And actually, some of the stuff I know, some of the stuff we do with Rory Sutherland on that course
Are we name dropping now? Are we?
is actually taking that, taking all of the data results and actually look at the anomalies, the ones outside of it, and going, actually, well, why did this happen and why did this happen? Rather than just taking the core line down the middle and going, well, that's what we thought, therefore it's great. Actually, there's some other data points over here that don't marry up. So what are these about? Rather than what you see in a lot of places is almost like, well, we'll exclude those because they're outside of the norm, and therefore we won't even look
Too
at what's happening
uncomfortable,
there.
so I don't want to be. I don't want to look. Think about it.
Yeah, they don't match what we already thought, so we'll just ignore those.
And quite often, if you're trying to get a true picture of something, analysing the 80% of the information that you want that skews the information to the result that you want to get, it's not going to give you growth. It's not going to give you information. Yes, it might tell you a marketing story that is really good, but actually, if you want that, if you want those three people that are not very fucking happy and they want to, what is the matter with me today? Is not that are not happy. That's your biggest growth option. That's your biggest opportunity, is to turn them into people who are advocates, who are really pleased with what's going on. And the way you handled it was exceptional. So, but that's going to be equally, if not more powerful of a story rather than some manipulated
Yeah.
BS.
Well, I will catch his name again, as I mentioned Rory Sutherland for the second time.
Sorry,
My mate Rory,
is he a follower?
he's a follower. He's very keen
Is he?
on the Two Data Sticks podcast as a concept. I think he's on next week, but he
That's
would
a
be.
bold statement. Talking about shitty data.
Yeah, talk about unethical mentions. But actually, he talks a lot about. He is good because he talks a lot about data and he talks a lot about human psychology. There's you can probably find clips of this on the internet if you search for it. But he talks about how train journeys, the concept that most train companies work to is that you want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. And he said, and when you actually speak to people, that's not what they want. They're A to B is fine. It doesn't matter if A to B is 1 hour or 3 hours, but they want to be kind of comfortable connectivity. They want a seat. And also, when you get to the station, the bit that people are annoyed at is the 40 minutes you wait at the station, kind of before and
Mm.
after. And he was talking about how actually, if there was an app that said, although you're booked on the 3:15, there's a seat available on the 2:45. Would you like to get on the train now? That would actually increase people's satisfaction with train companies. And someone in the work he was doing, he said someone stopped him and said, "You can't say that because that's not how train companies plan what they do. They're solely planned around can we get you from A to B as quickly as possible." Which is why he was kind of talking about HS2, and all of HS2 is about knocking, I don't know, 3 minutes off a journey from London to Birmingham that four people take. Whereas actually no one cares. If you're on a train and it leaves at 3 and it's due to get in at 4, if it leaves at 3, it gets in at 4, no one's bothered. If they've had a comfortable kind of journey, it's been nice. As I said, you've got connectivity, you've got a seat, you've got a table, all of that stuff is what's important for the person on the train, not how short can I make that journey or how quick can I make that journey.
Mm.
And so, again, coming back from an ethical point of view, if they then looked at kind of that business case or that data from that standpoint, the HS2 project falls flat because everything they talk about is speed and how quickly you can get from A to B. Whereas
justified a gazillion pound outlay and massive overrunning everything, just shave off a few minutes for a handful of people.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And all their costs will go up because NI's gone up, so they'll be billed more from all the companies working on it, which the government will have to fund. So that's another cycle.
We'll have to fund. You mean?
We'll have to fund, yeah. So it is that point, and I think it's you probably once you notice it, it's probably something you see constantly, that actually people have their view of how something should be, and therefore they will just find the data that supports it. Our shampoo should make your hair feel nicer. So therefore, of all the satisfaction surveys we've done, we'll find the ones that support it. And if one doesn't support it, but they've put an X at the bottom, we'll put that in the bin and disregard it.
50% of the time, it works 100% of the time.
Exactly.
Anchorman classic.
Yeah. So it's there's loads. I think there's loads you can look at from a data perspective that says almost as much as you. I mean, I always talk about stuff as kind of being a science experiment where you would write like a hypothesis that says, I believe this is what will happen if A plus B occurs. But then you go and do the experiment and then you come back to it and go, oh, that's not what happened. Actually, something else happened. But in a lot of cases, people are like, well, no, I wrote this is what happens with A plus B. Therefore, I'm almost going to redo the experiment a million times until I get to the point that I want to be at, rather than being able to flip it and go, actually, do you know what? We said we thought this is what would be the case, but actually, once it started, this has happened, and therefore we're going to have to do something different. And I think that's where the government constantly kind of screw themselves, is because they don't do that kind of retrospective. They're just quite bullish on, no, we're right. Whereas actually, if they stood up and said, look, we've increased national insurance, and actually we've seen this happen in the economy, that wasn't what our model predicted, and yes, this has had this impact, but here's some things we can do over the next couple of years to alleviate that, then people might not be quite so angry about it all the time, rather than just this bullish push through that you kind of get from people.
Yeah, but I think this is where democracy in action of a country, democracy, in quotes, is the same within an organisation, isn't it? Right? I always say to people, don't ever prescribe what you're doing by way of metrics or systems throughout a company without actually engaging with people that are maybe better positioned to understand the impact. And that's not saying you don't know what's going on, but if you're not doing something day in, day out, how can you make an objective decision on it without getting some element of feedback or element of impact, a point of information? There's a gazillion stories of people that have slammed systems into their organisation, and then within 6 months they've been rejected or pile of crap sat there with tech debt, more tech debt, another platform. It doesn't solve anything, because what typically, but there's often a wrapper around that, where if the people that are actually, that are more integrated with operational activities were actually involved in that process, you could probably have a far more successful rollout and adoption. And it's the same with anything. If you say to someone, I've said this before, but if you roll out an all staff meeting, some headline numbers, and most people sit there going, I've got a clue. Is it good or bad? Great. But I don't know what that means. I don't know where I fit into that picture. Whereas if you actually disseminate that down, and they go, okay, I can see now how my performance impacts that. I can see my role, how I'm measured, and impacts that. Because otherwise, it's just like, this is what we need to achieve, pass it down. This is what we need to achieve, pass it down. And by the time you get to a sort of level, if someone sits there going, I'm being targeted on X. How does that actually relate to that number? I
Yeah.
can't. It doesn't make sense.
And it and I think you can learn some stuff from kind of the IT industry in a way as well, because if you're doing it right in the way that you work and you're doing kind of scrum and sprints and iterations, and then you're getting feedback and then you're getting data and information. And if you look at the Y Combinator in America, I'm pretty sure the book I read was the guys who founded Reddit. I think they entered the Y Combinator with a food app or something. And it was through kind of processes of what works, what doesn't, what's given us the right things, that actually they ended up on this platform called Reddit.
Mm.
But if they'd have just been quite stubborn and gone, well, actually, no, we've all decided that this is what we're going to do, and that we're going to almost pick and choose the right data that supports that journey. Well, there wouldn't be multimillionaires to start with. Reddit wouldn't be a thing, whether that's good or bad. But it was because kind of that feedback, the loop, and being open to looking at the data and what it's actually telling you,
Yeah.
and then working off that rather than having this fixed mindset of this is where we think we're headed.
It's like the lean methodology, lean startup, isn't it? Where you have to be prepared. You have to accept that what you're being told, what you're experiencing, and be able to adapt that into what your approach is and what you're offering. Because you can bang your head against a brick wall for months, and suddenly you think, well, actually, at what point do you go? Maybe I
Yeah,
need to change this up a little bit.
yeah.
But
And
it's
there's lots of
obvious.
businesses, isn't
If
there? That,
if you're putting stuff out there and suddenly you're getting nothing back, then it's like, well, okay, well, how do I do that? And it's the same, even using our old favourite platform of LinkedIn. If you keep putting posts and stuff out there and you're getting absolutely bugger all coming back by way of engagement, then yeah, I have a particular view on what they do on there anyway, by way of algorithmic changes and things. But I think you have to be prepared to go, well, maybe it's not the right thing to put out then. And I did all those posts I put out randomly in the last few months were a test to see exactly what was the capacity of the reach. So I was intrigued that suddenly you put a post out about chip sauce onto a sauce on chips and you get 50,000 or whatever it was
that
impressions.
sounded like I put that post. Let's just be clear. You put a
Yeah,
post out on
commented
chips
on
and
yours.
chip sauce, and you did the best you've ever
I
done
did.
in your life.
But
And
there was a few of them I put out just to
therefore, you've
see.
looked at the data and you open a chip shop.
I looked at the data and realised that actually I need to somehow talk about chips and data in the same phrase, which obviously is going to be very tricky. I was pushing to see what was the actual potential reach of anything that you put out. Because I think, well, actually, you kind of put out day in day. You get some that go quite good, some that don't do very well at all, and some that just go, well, what the hell's happened there? I've had more reactions than I have impressions. That doesn't even make sense. So there's questionable
Yeah,
reporting
questionable.
ethics and that. But then you're going, well, unless you learn, I now know what that maybe that ceiling is from my network, just from that and my extended network. And you go, well, how can I then change what I say from a business perspective, not about chips, into that kind of connect, that kind of reach? I've not figured it out yet because obviously that's quite a stretch to go from chocolate bars or chip sauce to
Yeah,
building a
but
dashboard.
it is that I think it not to labour on a chip post where the answer is obviously gravy, but it is that
Right answer, by the way.
post that sparks debate or opinionated people can jump in on. Not really opinion. People with opinions can jump in on. That's quite quick and easy.
Mm.
Just to say I'd like this, and it's not confusing. Everyone eats chips. Everyone knows what they like with it. You can dive into that, and it's how you kind of take that approach, isn't it? Because the minute you talk, we've always said data's got a bad reputation. The minute if you start talking about what's your favourite data, you get nothing at all. Absolutely, zilch would come back or anything like that. So blending the two and making them kind of relatable. And I've always said the more kind of Facebooky your post, the better it does on LinkedIn, which must really upset people who like to write "This isn't Facebook"
Yeah.
underneath posts.
Oh, I had a couple of those. But in all seriousness, though, I only had on so many, like tens of thousands of impressions, 50,000, whatever it was, and I had thousands of hundreds and hundreds of comments. I only had kind of two or three that were quite negative, and I found that was quite interesting as well. I responded in kind,
Yeah,
but
I like it when you don't know them as well, and they come in quite negative, and you're like,
yeah, this guy, I put, what did I put the other, I put one out the other day. That it was a kind of a businessy related one. Some guy comes on and goes, what did he say? Something like self narcissism, self attempted narcissism, or something. And I went, who the fuck are you? They had no idea who this guy was. So I responded saying, it's been a long day. My brain's not functioning quite as well as it normally does, so I'm not catching your drift. But anyway, I wish you a very good evening and thanks for your comment. And within 5 minutes, he deleted it.
I did see that one. But then I put one, and this is going back, this might be going back 3 or 4 years. I met a mate in London at one of the pubs on the Thames, and I think I paid £7.50 for a pint. And I put something on there about that.
Flipping heck, that's a bit too cheap still.
That was steep for a pint of lager. And most people, as you'd expect, were, yeah, rip off £4. Then you get all my family from the north joining in from £2.10 where I live.
Working Man's Club.
Yeah, and then someone posted something like, "I'd hate to work for you. You sound like the most tight person." And it was like this real critique of how bad a manager I was because I thought £7.50 was expensive for a pint of lager. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I've never met you. You've got no idea who I am. What caused you to read that and in your brain go, I need to tell this guy he's an awful manager because he's just complained about the pint of lager, which is hilarious because actually when I did have a team of staff and we used to do drinks pretty much every Thursday, my team knew that I bought the first round.
Thursday Club.
Yeah, I always bought the first round of drinks for them.
What stays in Vegas? What goes in Vegas stays in
Yeah, it
Vegas.
used to cost me a fortune some nights. But yeah, it was very weird what people see and read and how they interpret things and then push stuff out to you. But very unethical of them to not know you. But yeah, I think ethic. It's almost like we'll end in a minute. But I think when we said there's a thing that is actually called ethical selling, there's almost like an ethical decision making or an ethical data reviewing thing, isn't there? Almost like needs calling out that are you doing this with data that just supports what you think is right, or actually can we just see the raw data set so that actually people can interpret it how they think it should be?
Yeah, I think this is where, without going off onto another topic about AI bias and ethics, because it's like you have to, do you just accept that at face value, or do you go, really? I'm not completely sure. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's like what point the biggest thing you can do in a business is ask questions, not just accept. Sometimes you've got gatekeepers in bigger companies as well. So they are the information gatekeepers. So they will intake all the information, all the data, all the reports, and then produce what they want. And you're going, well, that's wrong. It's this should be visible. And I've seen it happen in other bigger companies over the years. And you go, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Because you're not sharing that knowledge, that information. It's self-protectionism, is it? Fear of what people see or judge. And you go,
I think, and I think,
but how is that your decision to make?
and I think there's also fear of being seen to be wrong, isn't there? Whereas actually, if you present it as a hypothesis of kind of going, we're not quite sure what the answer is going to be, but let's collect the data in and then make a decision based on that. I'd rather have someone do that than sit there and go, no, my way is this, and therefore we're
Yeah,
all.
it's being, is it that there's a reluctance to be wrong
Yeah,
when making a decision? Because essentially a decision is a yes/no decision most of the time, isn't it? Do we do something? Do we don't do something? And it's like, well, how do you then? You have to be, you have to accept that that wasn't the right call. Um, that's going to get you a lot further than someone saying, well,
yeah.
maybe.
Absolutely. And I used to have this conversation with the guys when I was at Peterborough of saying, I would rather you make a decision based on what you know at the time, but make the decision rather than do nothing. And then if when we look at it 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, it turns out you made the wrong decision, I'm fine with that, because after 3 weeks we'll have more information, we'll understand it more. But if you'd have just done nothing and the inactivity would have killed us.
Mm.
So make a decision based on what you know. If you can justify the decision you've made at the time, to me that's perfectly acceptable and perfectly fine. Even if further down the line you look at it and go, do you know what, we got that one wrong.
Yeah. But how many times do you hear people saying, oops?
Yeah, oops, I did it again.
Some businesses do, only if they get their pants pulled down. But how many times, going back onto the topic at the beginning of business people in the, how often do you hear them say, maybe, as you made the point, how often do you hear them going, maybe that was the wrong thing to do?
Yeah. And is it a weakness of your own leadership in a way that you can't accept or admit
Mm.
that you got things wrong, and actually you want to be seen as almost like the oracle,
Perfect.
the
Perfection.
perfect, yeah.
It's the same. It's the same with social media, isn't it? There's a whole raft of people that they want to portray an image out that is perfect, but they don't never do anything wrong. They're never unhappy, struggling, and then you go, well, that's not real, is it? And
Because they're all earning 10 figures in a month with a 3-day course. That's how happy they are.
I know, yeah. But is it a sport thing? I think it might even have been Sir Pep Guardiola said that I'd rather someone tried something and made a mistake than didn't try it. They have my permission to try and be brave. And then if we end up screwing it, then so be it. Obviously, taken apart from being crap at times as well this year. And I think that's the system mentality, isn't it? As a leader, I accept that if you try, you have my blessing to try stuff. If it doesn't work, then so be it. But we have to understand why it didn't work, and then you don't do that again, sort of thing. There's that kind of openness, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I could get into an argument about education as well here, and how we're taught not to have that kind of approach.
Or should we save that for next time?
Save that for another day. My son's school annoyed me last week with an email, but we'll cover that one next time.
Ooh, maybe we should, because that's also about literacy, isn't it? And being able to interpret.
Yeah, and challenge it and question it, and yeah, and being able to do that. And I think some of the really good teachers, I'm not going to get into education, but I think they invite that challenge, and they want their students to say, what, ask questions. Why is that? What happened? Why did that occur? And the poor ones don't. They just lecture from the front.
Prescribing again, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is how you learn. This is the right answer.
Yeah.
Why? How
Why?
dare you say why? Get out.
But I'm sure there's a video, isn't there, of a man on a lecturer, and he's got two circles on the screen, and he says one circle's bigger than the other, and his hands up if you think it's the blue one, and like half the room put the hand up, and he said hands up if you think it's the red one, and half the room put the hand up, and then he went, they're actually identical in size, but because I told you there was a difference, all of you were trying to work out what the difference was, and none of you went, no, they're the same. And it's that kind of stuff. I think I love that kind of stuff, because I think that's what you start with leads into business and how you operate and people you've learned from, and stuff, and being open to challenge, being more ethical in your decision making, how you do stuff, and everything like that. I think we could have opened a can of worms that we talk for hours on, to be honest.
Well, next one.
We'll cover it next time. So
Remember, when we have the conversation before we start, going, what we're talking about today, that's what we're talking about today.
yeah, watch this one again, and we'll remember what we said that we were going to talk about.
We won't. We'll have the same conversation.
We'll be scrabbling around for something 10 minutes before, as always. I'm sure some people plan their podcast months in advance.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's a bit boring, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, mate. We should call it a day, and I shall speak to you soon.
Bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye.